For the Concord Chamber Music Society, I'm Anthony Princiati, inviting you to a rich and exciting program of music by Mendelssohn, Britten, and Beethoven, performed by the award-winning Chiara String Quartet, Sunday, November 27th at 3 p.m. at the Concord Academy Performing Arts Center. The Chiara Quartet, previously artist-in-residence at Harvard, is currently the string quartet in residence at the University of Nebraska School of Music. The ensemble has been widely praised for its vital and deeply personalized performances of both new and classic repertoire, qualities that are informed by their custom of performing by memory. The program begins with one of Felix Mendelssohn's most popular chamber music works, his String Quartet No. 3 in D major. This quartet is the first in a set of three the composer wrote at a particularly happy time in his life, in the wake of his marriage and the birth of his first child. It embodies the accessible, classically restrained romanticism that's so characteristic of Mendelssohn's mature style. The quartet's opening allegro movement has an energy and buoyancy that brings to mind the joyous heroics of his great string octet. The two middle movements that follow embrace a more intimate tone, first in a remarkably gentle, almost soulful minuet, and then in an andante that has the character of a plaintive aria. It's music that shows Mendelssohn's sympathy with the concept of chamber music as a social implement, to be played, shared, and enjoyed by family and friends. The quartet closes by returning to the extroversion of the opening movement with a brilliant saltarello, a perennially popular dance at Roman carnivals whose characteristic, vigorous rhythms Mendelssohn had first used so effectively in the finale of his Italian symphony. This ecstatic, almost giddy music provides the performers with wonderful opportunities to display their individual and collective virtuosity, and it also serves to end this quartet in the highest, most jubilant spirits. After the Mendelssohn will listen to music Benjamin Britten wrote early in his career, his three divertimenti for string quartet. These three short diversionary pieces from the 1930s were originally slated to be part of a larger suite of musical portraits of Britten's schoolboy friends. But after an initial performance proved unsuccessful, he decided to leave the work unpublished. They reappeared after Britten's death in 1976, and since then these three divertimenti have become a standard in the 20th century repertoire for string quartet. The opening march is decidedly light in tone, evoking the image of young children earnestly and industriously playing with toy soldiers. And if we imagine what kind of army might be marching to this music, it's safe to assume it's a pretty ragtag, non-threatening bunch. It's followed by a waltz that's notable for its prevailingly wistful sentiment. As Mendelssohn did with the second movement of his third quartet, Britten forgoes the usual propulsive energy of the dance music he's chosen in favor of tenderness and lyricism. Its gentle atmosphere stands in stark contrast to that of the final divertimento, a rambunctious, muscular burlesque that provides us with an early example of the sheer creativity, fluency, and skill that would become such central features of Britten's music. The Chiara Quartet will conclude its program with a performance of Beethoven's Opus 130 String Quartet in B-flat major. This work is the second of the composer's 5 late quartets, a group of pieces of such startling originality and intellectual achievement that they've become a sort of collective holy grail for many musicians. In this piece, Beethoven breaks new ground by expanding the genre beyond its usual 4-movement format. Its 6-movement layout reflects a process that's common in Beethoven's most innovative works, in which the ideas might seem unusual, but are in fact just extensions of previous models. So whereas the string quartet format established by Haydn had two movements of significant length, bookending a slow movement and a dance movement, Beethoven's six-movement design in Opus 130 is created by simply doubling the number of slow and dance movements and laying them out in a similarly alternating sequence. What makes the architecture of this quartet so extraordinary is its original finale, a massive 15-minute movement that's called the Grosse Fuge, or Great Fugue. And the history of this piece reminds us of something that's often forgotten, which is that the music of Beethoven's final period was initially met with a near total incomprehension that lasted well into the 20th century. His late quartets in particular were thought of as evidence that his deafness had become so profound that he could no longer compose, or even that he'd lost his mind. With the notable exception of the Ninth Symphony, it was the music of Beethoven's middle period, pieces like his Third and Fifth Symphonies, for instance, that built his reputation, and eventually his legend. But what critics didn't realize about Beethoven's late music was that it simply reflected a new emphasis on an often overlooked aspect of his creative personality. Our association of Beethoven with compelling emotion and dramatic rhetoric can obscure our awareness of his stunning musical intellect. It's a dominating presence in his final works, and in the Grosse Fuge it's applied with such ruthless energy that Stravinsky described the piece as eternally modern. So, imagine the plight of one of the violinists in the ensemble that was to premiere the quartet, who was chosen to approach Beethoven and tell him that his finale was unplayable and to ask him to write another. By all accounts, Beethoven flew into a rage that fully comports with later cinematic depictions of his temperament, but he did eventually comply, publishing the Grosse Fuge as a separate piece that he designated his Opus 133. These days, each quartet makes its own choice on which finale to play, and we'll have the opportunity to hear the Chiara Quartet play this work in its epic original form. So please join us Sunday, November 27th at 3 p.m. at the Concord Academy Performing Arts Center as the Concord Chamber Music Society presents the Chiara String Quartet in what promises to be a truly remarkable musical event. For the Concord Chamber Music Society, I'm Anthony Princiotti.